Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, JTF. My name is Chaim Ben Pesach. This is part 2 of our series, If I Were the Prime Minister of Israel. If I, Chaim Ben Pesach, were the Prime Minister of Israel, how would it affect America and the American people? Well, continuing with what we spoke about on part 1, I want to talk about foreign policy a little, because I, as the Prime Minister of Israel, would have a huge movement behind me here in the United States. Tens of millions of Bible-believing Christians who support Israel would join with American Jews who would be supporting the Israeli government, those American Jews who would support us. I mean, of course, there are left-wing, self-hating American Jews who would be against us. Screw them. We would do what we have to do regardless. We're not interested in their attempts to distort American and Israeli policy. But we would have a lot of American Jews who would support us, and we would have a lot of Bible-believing Christians who would support us, and a lot of other right-wing American patriots who would join our movement, because it would be a right-wing patriotic American movement. And the Israeli government, with me being Prime Minister, the Israeli government would be funding this mass movement to end all foreign immigration, to end all foreign aid, to make America energy independent. That's what we talked about on part 1, basically. But what about foreign policy? We would immediately say to the United States of America that it is insane to talk about bringing democracy to Muslim countries, to have thousands of American soldiers killed in vain, murdered in vain. To bring democracy to Iraq is insane and disgusting. And that should not be the policy of the United States. First of all, I would order the Israeli Air Force to immediately destroy Iran's nuclear bomb-making program. That is the real threat to America, Israel, and the West, not Iraq. Iraq was never the threat. Even under Saddam Hussein, Saddam Hussein was a threat 20 years ago. But after the American army destroyed his nuclear program in the first Persian Gulf War, and you had the severe UN sanctions, he wasn't a threat anymore. Iran is the threat. The Israeli Air Force would destroy Iran's nuclear bomb-making program, and that would potentially save millions of American lives, because the Iranians are planning to set off nuclear bombs in major American cities. If they get their hands on nuclear bombs, these lunatics in Iran have made it clear that they're going to share those nuclear bombs with the Islamic terrorist organizations that Iran has sponsored for decades. And their dream is to set off bombs that will murder millions of Americans. The Israeli Air Force will, I can assure you, the Israeli Air Force can get the job done. We would take out that Iranian terrorist nuclear bomb-making program. We have the best pilots in the world in the Israeli Air Force. Jewish kids, these are 18, 19-year-old Jewish kids, Jewish geniuses. And they know the technology of the aircraft and the bombs and and they're very good at aiming and everything else and running the planes. I mean, they're just fantastic pilots, fantastic pilots. We would use them and we would eliminate that Iranian Muslim Nazi terrorist threat. So that would be a big relief. And we would urge the United States to get the hell out of Iraq. And once America becomes energy independent and doesn't need oil, we don't have to worry about Iraq. We don't have to worry about the Middle East. We don't have to worry about these things. If we weren't addicted to oil, the Middle East would be irrelevant. The Middle East couldn't threaten America if we weren't addicted to oil. And so we would begin a campaign to say the answer is not to, instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars bogged down in a war with thousands of wonderful young Americans are being senselessly murdered, why don't you spend the money to eliminate oil as a factor? If you spent just a fraction of that money every year to create alternatives to oil, you would put the Muslim terrorists out of business. Even if Al-Qaeda took over Iraq, it wouldn't be worth anything without the oil. It's unbelievable. The only reason Al-Qaeda is a threat is because Osama bin Laden is a Saudi multi-billionaire with a multi-billionaire family. And the Saudi regime financed 9/11. The Saudi regime that George Bush loves financed 9/11. The wife of the Saudi ambassador directly sent money to the hijackers right before the attack on 9/11. They financed that attack and have applauded it ever since. They still call the 19 terrorist hijackers on Saudi television the Magnificent 19. They still praise them to this day and call them shahidim. Shahidim means martyrs, holy sacred martyrs in the Islamic faith. That's the holiest thing you can be in Islam, is a martyr. If you give your life murdering non-Muslim infidels, that is the holiest thing. If you read the Quran and read the Hadith, you'd be familiar with that. And if I were the Prime Minister of Israel, you would know what it says in the Quran and the Hadith, because we would make sure the American people know exactly what it says in those evil books. You would know exactly what your enemy is all about. And you would understand the desperate need for us to end our addiction to oil, which is what is fueling and funding the Islamic cancer. And if I were the Prime Minister of Israel, I would say to the American people, the time has come for an end to affirmative action. And the time has come for an end to programs that are discriminating on the basis of race. The Jewish people, because they're so successful and so intelligent, have suffered from quotas and affirmative action more than any other people, because if the Jews are 2% of America's population, the Jews are only about 2% of America's population. But in the 50s and 60s, after World War II, people felt guilty after the Holocaust, so they opened up all these universities like Yale and Harvard and Princeton that used to discriminate against Jews, opened their doors and said, no more discrimination, now it's just based on test scores. When that happened in the 50s and 60s, do you know that 60 or 70% of the student population in these big Ivy League universities were Jewish? 2% of America's youth were Jewish. Only 2% of America's youth were Jewish, and there were 60 or 70% of the students in the best universities, because the Jews are a brilliant people, let's face it. But because of quotas and affirmative action, now stupid people are accepted there solely because of race. That has to end. And yes, I would stand against the evil people in this country. I would stand up against the bigots and the Nazis of America. And I'm not referring just to white Nazis like David Duke and Pat Buchanan, who are evil people, who really are monstrous, evil, satanic people. But they don't represent most white Americans. Most white Americans don't agree with Hitler and Nazism. However, among black Americans, most blacks do agree with black Nazis like Louis Farrakhan, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. Most black Americans do support that. That's why you had a 1 million-man march for Louis Farrakhan. That's why the Congressional Black Caucus, which gets 95% of the black vote every 2 years, supports Louis Farrakhan and goes to his rallies. That's why Jesse Jackson has what he calls a sacred covenant with Louis Farrakhan. When Jesse Jackson ran for president, he got 94% of the black vote. When Al Sharpton, who also has a covenant with Farrakhan, also speaks at his rallies and also supports Farrakhan and is also a Jew-hating pig, when that fat pig Al Sharpton ran for mayor of New York City, he got 93% of the black vote. We have to expose this evil, cancerous hatred that exists, that has overtaken black America. And the whole culture, the culture of rap and hip-hop and this other filth and garbage, this other stupid jungle crap, we've got to expose this because it's a culture of evil. It's a culture of pure evil. And God will destroy this country if this country, God forbid, goes down that road. And young white people are going down that road, piercing their faces and their genitals and everything else in sight. It's insane. It's sickening. It's disgusting what's happening to this country. Young white people making their hair like Rasta-master hairdos to try to look like black gang members. I mean, first of all, you look stupid. You look cowardly. You look stupid. You look retarded. You look like a bunch of degenerate wiggers. And America is not supposed to be embracing evil culture like that. And that's where we're going if we allow Hollywood and we allow the evil Bolshevik news media and all these other evil forces to continue. But if I were Prime Minister of Israel, we would set up an alternative media for the American people. Tens of millions of people would be able to turn to an alternative media. Not Fox, which is phony, which is also part of the establishment. Real right-wing alternative media. If I were Prime Minister of Israel, the Israeli government would fund a movement in America of all decent people, Jew and Gentile, all decent people who want to stand up for what's right, who want to stand up for what God demands of us in the Bible, who want to make America, Israel, and other Western nations what God intends for us to be. Because the Jewish people are supposed to be or la'amim, it says in the Bible, a light unto the nations. A light unto the nations is not Hollywood or the news media. A light unto the nations is a Prime Minister of Israel that will fight to save little Israel, heroic little Israel, and that will also fight to save this great nation, the United States of America. Because America is worth saving and worth fighting for. This is a great country, and we should fight to save it. And if I were Prime Minister of Israel, together we would save it. Shalom.